Welcome back to Taking the Hill. I'm Patrick Murphy. We're talking today about how the military can be an agent of social change. Perhaps the most important reform in the history of our armed services was its desegregation in 1948. Joining me now is Colonel Irving Smith, a decorated Army Ranger and Associate Professor of Sociology at West Point and an Afghanistan War veteran. Colonel, great to have you on Taking the Hill.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
So, Colonel, when President Truman ordered desegregation of our military back in 1948, the military caused a fuss. They weren't happy about it. Why was that?
Well, you know, things in our society, and to include the military, sometimes when the law changes, things change de jure. They don't necessarily change de facto. And so with the military in general, what you find is that typically if there's a change, we obey orders. That's what we're tasked to do. But sometimes we do have a hard time forgetting the past.
Yeah. How about as far as how far has the military come, do you think, in these years, these decades since?
Well, you know, if you look from a socio-historical perspective, the military has come a long way. I mean, we've been leaders along lots of fronts. We haven't always led in every area of social change, but even in those areas where we haven't actually led, we have been trendsetters in other ways.
Well, how would you say they've been trendsetters? You know, has the Army gotten it right?
Well, I think for the most part we have gotten it right, and that's not to suggest that the military is a panacea by any sense of the word. However, for the most part, we have kind of gotten it right. As you alluded to, you know, President Truman's Executive Order 9981 that kind of did desegregation in the armed forces is really the model for us to kind of follow. And so that particular order led the way for the civil rights movement in lots of ways. There have been other things where maybe we haven't necessarily been at the forefront, but we have been trendsetters. A great example of that was the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 2010. Soon after that law was repealed, several states followed suit.
Yeah. And past marriage equality, I would agree with you. Now, how would you say, you know, your personal story? You know, you're an academy professor at West Point. Forbes magazine said West Point's the #1 college in the nation. You know, how about your journey? Was it difficult getting to where you are today?
Well, I would say that, you know, my journey has been pretty interesting. In fact, I would argue that for me, it's very improbable that I'm even here. You know, I'm the son of Irving Smith, Jr., whose dad was an elevator operator. He had 9 kids, and he made $3,000 at the height of his career. I'm also the son of Diane Smith, whose father was Sherman Young. And Sherman was a sharecropper whose mother was a slave. I don't think that there's any other place as magical as America where a kid like me could actually make it to those levels. And I'm sure my grandparents are looking down at me right now and very proud.
Yeah. You know, I was reading some of the things that you've published. One of them was about the increase in field grade officers of African American field grade officers in the Army. Basically, in the last 24 years, it's doubled. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a paper that I wrote several years ago called "Why Black Officers Still Fail," and I tried to do a restudy of a paper that Remo Butler had done years before. And what I found is that actually we have moved ahead, and so I found that African-American officers were being promoted to the grades of lieutenant colonel and colonel at much higher rates than they had been 14 or 15 years before.
Yeah, and I look at, you know, 90% of the military is enlisted, and then 10% are officers. So of the 10%, we're talking very high level as far when we get to the field grade level at the colonel, lieutenant colonel level.
Absolutely.
How about the next frontier when we talk about the military as a change agent? Where do you think that will be?
Well, I think there are lots of ways that this could go. So from a social perspective, I really think that the next front is ableness. You know, we have soldiers, sailors, and airmen out there now who are serving with great disabilities. A great example of that is Colonel Greg Gatson, who's now a garrison commander out in our Army at the brigade level, doing wonderful things. And I know that there are children out there in America who are looking at him and looking up to him and saying, you know what, if he can serve and I have a disability, why can't I serve as well?
Yeah,
so,
I mean, that's a great, here's a guy who lost his legs in combat and is now leading 3,500 men and women as that garrison commander. Irving, thank you so much, Colonel, for being here. I appreciate it. Looking forward to having you back on Taking the Hill, hopefully in the future.
Thank you very much, and thank you what you do for our service members.
Thank you for your service to our nation.
Thank you.